Good morning, grade 12s. It's time for us to start our new routine of normal. So, this is how it's going to work. Before I start with the topic, we're going to be dealing with a certain section of work every day. I will send you the PowerPoint presentation with my recording, and then I will give you some activities to do to practice. Please make sure you stay up to date. We can't afford to get behind on any work. I will open the group chat for an hour every day, and then you can ask me any questions that you may have on the topic. So, moving on to our next topic, the foreign exchange markets. Still under macroeconomics, so it will be examined under paper 1 for your mid-year exam, your trial exam, and your final exam. A lot of you may have heard about the foreign exchange markets, also known as the forex market. A lot of young people are speculating now on the market and making money on it. So as you'll remember, if you think back to the circular flow model, our foreign sector is one of our 4 participants, and foreign sector, we have injections in the form of our receipts from exports, and we have leakages, payments for imports. So most importantly, we want to discover, why do countries trade with each other? What is the purpose? Why don't we produce everything in our own country and consume it that way too? So please remember that in economics, prices are based on supply and demand. So different countries will trade with each other because of price differences. And why are there price differences? Think back to the basics of economics. Prices are based on supply and demand. So, which means there must be differences between their supply conditions and their demand conditions in each country. So let's have a look at each of these. As I said to you the other day, the supply and demand reasons, they can examine under paragraph questions, so please make sure you are able to name them as well as be able to explain them properly. Our demand reasons are as follows. The size of the population, so obviously the more people there are, the more demand there is for a product. The level of income, the more people earn, the more they can buy. Any changes in the standard of living, remember the developing country won't be spending a lot on luxury goods until they become more developed. That's when they can spend more of their income on luxuries, etc. And as soon as there's an increase in the standard of living, there'll be an increase in demand. Then, of course, consumer preference and taste. Each country has different likes and dislikes, just like you as individuals. And then our consumption patterns, which also relates to the standard of living. So depending on where a country is in its level of development, that will determine what goods are demanded. If we look at our supply reasons, first of all, natural resources. Not all countries are given the same natural resources. It's not all equal. South Africa has far more natural resources than most countries. And where the supply is higher, obviously it will be cheaper to supply. Also climatic conditions, so different countries are suited to grow certain agricultural products better or to produce certain goods better. Our labor resources, highly skilled labor force means that there will be higher productivity, and as soon as there's a higher productivity, it will be cheaper to produce those goods. Continuing, technological resources, we know that machinery works pay, doesn't require certain conditions apart from maintenance. So if there's a lot of technology available in that country, it will be cheaper to produce goods as well. Specialization Specialization gives rise to the economies of scale. So as soon as a country specializes in a good, it becomes relatively cheaper to produce each unit of that good. And lastly, capital. The shortage of capital obviously means that our developing countries cannot produce the goods that they need, or they cannot produce it as cheaply as the developed countries can. And the capital allows us to buy into technology, so machinery, and that will obviously allow us to produce the goods at a cheaper rate. So a very important, or two very important concepts that you need to understand is absolute versus comparative advantage. They can ask it in the short questions, and they'll ask which country has the absolute advantage and which country has the comparative advantage. So the definitions may look the same. What you need to understand, absolute advantage is based on the units of input being used compared to the units of output, whereas comparative advantage is about the cost of the units of input versus the output a country can produce. So the definition of absolute advantage is if one country can produce a particular product at a lower cost than any other country. So therefore, they're producing more output with the same input. Sorry. Comparative advantage is when a country can produce the same output at a lower resource input cost, meaning the resources that they use, it might be the same amount of units that they use or more units that they use to produce that output, but it is cheaper to pay for that input than another country. So for example, a place where the wages are lower. Okay, so and I said I would do examples with you. I'm going to do that on a separate slideshow. So let's look at the last section that we need to look at today, and that's the effects of international trade. So our effects of international trade, first of all, is specialization. As soon as we are producing more to satisfy the demand of the whole world, we have the effect of specialization. Specialization means that that country is concentrating on how best to produce a certain good, and therefore it increases living standards. If none of the countries specialized, if we didn't get to experience economies of scale, it would mean that only the wealthy citizens of any country would be able to afford imported items. Secondly, mass production. So, because we are not only satisfying the demand of our country, but the whole world, obviously demand is increased. And therefore, again, economies of scale, large-scale production makes the items more affordable or economically viable to produce. Also, it has the effect of increasing increasing efficiency. So remember, the more competition a business has, the better they will behave, meaning they will be more concentrated on finding cheaper ways to produce or ways of producing a better quality product, etc. So the businesses producing that certain product will also then lower the cost of producing that product. And lastly, globalization. So globalization definition says that trade is the main element. Obviously, by trading internationally with other countries, we are furthering globalization, which will lead to the sharing of ideas, cultures, etc. These effects of international trade can be examined under paragraph questions, so please make sure you're able to explain them. I will post a voice note or another slideshow a bit later about examples of absolute and comparative advantage. But for today, what you need to know, supply and demand reasons, absolute versus comparative advantage, and the effects of international trade. I am going to Activity 1 on page 75 of the Enjoy textbook. Please make sure you do this in your workbook, and at the end of the week I will be going through solutions to all the homework I've given you during the week. Thank you and have a lovely day. Now I just have to figure out how to